Hey yo, so look, some of them songs that y'all are giving me is copywritten. So once you give me a copywritten song and I play it, and I'm not authorized to play that song, they block the stream. Yeah, they block the stream. Yeah, man, that's crazy, man. That's what they do. They only do that when on certain songs, like you know what I'm saying. Certain songs, like I don't know. That's why sometimes when I do the streams and stuff, I be trying to do like interviews or documentaries or hood talks, stuff like that, because majority of the time when I do it, like they'll block it. You know what I'm saying? So that's basically what they did. They blocked it. I need an overlay. What's the overlay? What's the overlay, bro? What's up with what's oh they just dropped a documentary on hold on. They just dropped a documentary on 1-4. I was going I was going do a I was gonna do a reaction to it, but I'll watch that real quick. A screen that covers the video, so I'm just playing the audio. So you think you think it's me playing the video is what's doing it, or is the audio? It could be the audio though, you know.
Hey man, are you Alpocalypse 423?
Yeah.
What's the
It could be the audio,
deal? You got me
but it's
running all over
only
the
on
place day and
certain
night.
Oh, I have
songs.
Spectrum now. Fastest Wi-Fi.
Oh, you know what it is? It's probably look. It's probably you know what it is. It's probably because I got the video bigger than the actual camera of me doing the reaction. So maybe I might just change the screen up and make the video smaller and make me bigger. Because I never had that problem with my other setup. It's always when I had a camera when I had a video a little bit bigger, you know? Oh. Because I never had it when I was live streaming before, man. Like I never had a problem until now that the video is so big. Like when the shit was smaller, when it was smaller, it's like they didn't care. But now that it's big, like they blocked the video yesterday too. But yo, send me. I'm about to look up the overlay. All right, that sound like it's some gangster shit, man. That sound like it's some gangster shit, man.
Violence, murder, drugs, gangs, police corruption, organized crime. These are not words that immediately spring to mind when thinking of
Is
Melbourne,
these people
Australia,
from your?
often
Oh,
deemed
okay, yeah, they're from
Australia's
Australia.
most livable city. However, during the late 1990s and early 2000s, the city of Melbourne was the stage for one of Australia's biggest gang wars, all centered around the drug trade and the factions fighting for control of it. And Carl Williams, a labourer turned drug kingpin. This is the story of Melbourne's gangland killings. Welcome back to another episode of Shadow Matter. Today's episode, in our series of Melbourne's criminal underworld, we're going to be exploring the story of Melbourne's gangland killings and its prominent players, Carl Williams and his rivals, the Moran brothers. This story of how one ordinary Aussie labourer rose to the top of Melbourne's criminal underworld and became its most prolific drug trafficker. The state of Victoria, and Melbourne specifically, has always been a melting pot of cultures. During its gold rush boom years during the 19th century, it saw an influx of cosmopolitan identities into the city. After the First World War, an immigration boom, mainly from Europe, saw Melbourne's population swell. A lot of these immigrants used English as a second language and had very little formal education. Melbourne's port became a great economic opportunity for many of these foreign labourers. A large proportion of them were of Irish, Italian, and Asian descent. A lot of Irish immigrants found work in the port of Melbourne as labourers, either painting, scrubbing, or general maintenance of the many ships that passed through its docks. Later on, during the first half of the 20th century, unions would begin to develop to ensure the labourers to fair work and equal pay. One of these unions were known as the Painters and Dockers Union. This union, albeit favoured altruistic purposes in the beginning, tended to turn more corrupt as the 20th century rolled on. The Port of Melbourne was closely located to the Queen Victoria Market, which during the time was closely and secretively controlled by the criminal community known as the Honoured Society.
Yeah, man, you already know how they go, man. They be hating me, man.
Otherwise known as
the
Australian Mafia. This community
the Australian Mafia. Somebody told me about these
of
boys.
Italian descent. We have already discussed the Ndrangheta before in a previous episode. If you would like to watch that episode, we will provide a link in the description below. The port was seen as a natural distribution point for many of Australia's illicit freight, such as drugs, with the Queen Victoria markets close by, made for a lucrative business between the Union and the many gangs
where dude did
surrounding
that
the
one
area,
video at.
such as the Ndrangheta. In time, the port became a huge revenue stream for the gangs involved with illicit activities,
it looks like that.
And naturally, drug trafficking became a big revenue stream between the Ndrangheta and the Painters and Dockers. This marriage of illegal business would see a steady flow of drugs into Melbourne in the later half of the 20th century. During the 90s, a new recreational drug appeared on the scene, MDMA, otherwise known as ecstasy. During the 1990s, the local manufacture of amphetamines had increased to the point where the local police described Melbourne as the amphetamines capital of Australia. During this time, saw an increase in the trade of recreational drugs such as ecstasy, which was seeing a rise in popularity due to the newly established nightclub and rave scene. Many of the trades were organized and controlled by shady nightclub owners with criminal backgrounds. These criminals, often acting alongside gangs or independent traffickers, could almost always be traced back to either the Painters and Dockers Union or the Honoured Society. One of the biggest drug traffickers at the time was John Higgs, a member of a motorcycle gang called the Black Uhlans. Beginning his criminal career in 1970s, he had been involved in drug trafficking and other illegal activities for a number of years, before police caught wind of his operations in 1984. This would begin a 15-year operation from police to try and capture Higgs, who had become so proficient and highly sophisticated in the criminal underworld, he had become the biggest amphetamine producer in Australia. Not only that, but police found that Higgs' group had become so important, he became the go-to man for anything illegal. He was known to import cocaine from the Americas, cannabis from New Guinea, guns from the Philippines, and manufacture amphetamines in Victoria. Police established that 1.7 million Australian dollars had passed through Higgs' hands from 1982 to 1993. After
God
1996 and the law catching up to John Higgs, he was arrested and sentenced to 16 years incarceration. This left a huge power vacuum in Melbourne's criminal underworld.
16 years. The underboss should have took over. The capos
The
should have took
genesis
over.
of the underworld conflict can be traced back to the 1996 arrest of John Higgs. At the time, Australia's number one trafficker of amphetamines. Higgs was a well-connected criminal with a wide network of contacts, both in the underworld and among corrupt police. The downfall of Higgs and his closest associates meant younger criminals became keen to enter the drug trade and fill the vacuum. This included underworld figures such as the Moran brothers, and their father Lewis was a known member of the Painters and Dockers Union, known for their connections to the Australian mafia and drug trade in the ports of Melbourne, would become influential players in the criminal underworld of Melbourne, forming alliances and rivals of the many mafia families in Melbourne. The Carlton Crew is a criminal organisation that began with connections to the Australian mafia in the 1970s, but became one of their fierce rivals in Melbourne's criminal underworld. The group was known for racketeering and drug dealing, as well as owning bars and nightclubs in Lygon Street, Carlton, a suburb of Melbourne.
You would think they were owned bars and clubs.
Alphonse Gangitano, also known as the Black Prince of Lygon Street, was the face of the Carlton Crew during the 90s. The Carlton Crew were known allies of the Moran family. The Ndrangheta, or Honoured Society, more commonly referred to as the Australian Mafia, are a criminal organisation that originated in Calabria, Italy. During the early half of the 20th century, they set up families and territories in Australia, most predominantly Melbourne and Victoria. They were known for controlling trade and extortion of the fruit and veggie industry in Melbourne, and have a long history with the Queen Victoria Market and the trafficking of drugs through the ports of Melbourne. The Sunshine Crew was a loose gang of childhood friends, led by Paul P.K. Kalapolitis, and contained other notable members such as Andrew Benji Veneman and Dino Dibra. The group got their name from the suburb of Melbourne, where the members all lived and grew up together. After these factions began to fight for dominance over control of Melbourne's drug trade, another unlikely faction was beginning to form on the fringes of the conflict. An unassuming overweight labourer, this man would go from supermarket worker to Melbourne's drug lord in the span of a few years. This man was Carl Williams.
Carl Williams. Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I said. I said that's where he shot that video at. I could tell.
The murder of the leader of the Carlton Crew, Alphonse Gangitano, in 1998. Investigations could not prove who the murderer was, but it is widely believed that his former associate, Jason Moran, is the culprit. The murder was believed to be a way of Moran silencing Gangitano from talking to police about an assault that the two were involved in a few years earlier. Carl Williams was an Australian labourer in his 20s when the origins of the Gangland War were forming. He was born in 1970 in Melbourne to parents Barbara and George Williams. George was also a small-time petty criminal and drug dealer. By 1995, Carl Williams was working for the Morans as their driver. Often dismissed as harmless, the Moran brothers used to bully and belittle Carl, referring to him as Fat Boy. Unbeknownst to the Morans, Carl Williams was eager to move up higher in the criminal underworld and begin his own amphetamine empire. It was around this time that Williams approached another highly notorious amphetamine drugs manufacturer, Tony Mockbell. It was through Tony Mockbell that Williams learned the tricks of the trade and learned how to cook his own high-grade ecstasy. When the Morans needed a cook to make their own batch of drugs, Carl Williams offered his newly acquired skills as part of his services. It wasn't long, however, until Williams decided he would use his own knowledge and connections to make and sell his own merchandise, in the process undercutting the Moran's street value. And while Carl was quietly becoming rich, the Morans were growing increasingly frustrated and paranoid. Soon, Williams' relationship would sour and tensions would begin to arise. In October 1999, Carl Williams' relationship with the Morans had deteriorated to the point where Jason Moran shot Williams in the abdomen over a purported $80,000 drug debt. Carl Williams survived the attack, and while recuperating, plotted his revenge against the Moran family. It was less than a year later when Carl Williams decided to make good on his promise to destroy the Morans. On the 15th of June 2000, Mark Moran was arriving home in the suburbs of Elberfelde. As he got out of his white Holden utility truck, he was shot and killed by an awaiting Carl Williams. It was also around this time that the other factions began pointing fingers at each other over the undercutting of the street value of ecstasy. Naturally, each faction would begin to conspire against one another, and these accusations would often have violent outcomes. Spanning the years from 1999 to the end of 2000, 11 murders were committed, all believed to be connected to Melbourne's drug trade. Some high-profile members of the criminal underworld met their demise, including the likes of Frank Benvenuto, the son of Liborio Benvenuto, considered at one time to be the godfather of the Ndrangheta's families in Melbourne. Another loss was of one of the Sunshine Crew members, Dino Dibra, who was known to be an associate of Carl Williams. More surprisingly, the murder of Dibra was believed to have been orchestrated by Mark Moran, who employed the services of the city's underworld assassin for hire, Andrew Benji Veneman, who was actually a childhood friend of Dibra. Benji Veneman was at the time considered to be the underworld's top assassin. He was of Greek Cypriot descent and was a known associate of the Sunshine Crew. Police believed he was responsible for at least several of the gangland killings. After the death of Dino Dibra in October 2000, 6 more murders were to take place until the Victorian Police Force formed the Purana Task Force in June 2003 to officially investigate Melbourne's underworld. Despite police corruption and being short-staffed, the task force was generally praised for their efforts to stop the killings. However, it would be a few years before justice and peace was brought back to the streets of Melbourne. And with a few main suspects, one name kept cropping up again and again. The now notorious Carl Williams.
Carl Williams
At this
putting
time,
that work in.
Williams was enjoying his success as becoming Melbourne's #1 ecstasy trafficker, even referring to himself as Mr. Premier. Despite all his success, he still had a few scores to settle, and the remaining members of the Moran family were on the top of his list. It was around this time that Williams had employed the services of Melbourne's top hitman, Benji Veneman, and eventually became close friends. On the 21st of June 2003, 35-year-old Jason Moran and his minder, 40-year-old Pascal Barbaro, were fatally shot as they sat in a parked blue van while Jason's children were attending a football practice. 5 children were to witness the murder, including Moran's 6-year-old twins. This would be the case that shocked the nation of Australia into realizing how cold the gangland killings were becoming. After a series of murders surrounding the now prolific Williams family, Carl Williams was arrested and charged with making threats to kill a detective on the Purana Task Force and the investigator's girlfriend. The threats were made in a taped conversation via telephone. Carl was bailed 2 weeks later. By 2004, Carl Williams had become a household name, and many media outlets were trying to get an exclusive interview. In February 2004, Williams went on record with news magazine The Bulletin, denying allegations that he had paid Benji Veneman 100,000 Australian dollars for 5 of the murders. However, it would seem luck would soon be running out for Mr. Premier Carl Williams, as the underworld was keen to get rid of this thorn in their side. On March 23, 2004, rivals of the Williams family, the Carlton Crew, were eager to see an end to Carl and his operations. This led to Mick Gatto, head of the Carlton Crew, fatally shooting Melbourne's top hitman for hire and close acquaintance of Carl Williams, Andrew Benji Veneman. Gatto claims he shot Veneman in La Pucella, a pizza shop in Carlton, Melbourne, after an argument and claimed it was in self-defense. Gatto was later acquitted in trial. Without his right-hand man, Carl Williams decided to hit back and take out the last remaining figure of the Moran crime family.
Carl
On March
Williams
the
been going
31st,
crazy.
2004, Louis Moran, father of Jason Moran and stepfather to Mark Moran, was shot and killed in broad daylight by 2 balaclava-clad men in the front bar of the Brunswick Club in Brunswick, Melbourne. Louis had only recently been released on bail for drug trafficking charges, and police had warned him that his life was in danger. It was later proven that Carl Williams had paid for the hit. What followed was almost a tit-for-tat spate of killings in the criminal underworld of Melbourne, mainly between the Williams family and their fierce rivals, the Carlton Crew.
Do you spend over $100 a month when shopping online?
That's crazy.
If you do, you're going to want to see this. I've already saved $350.
With media scrutiny and increasing feelings of fear in the public, the Purana Task Force intensified their investigations into what the press were now calling the Gangland Killings. They were finally closing in on their main suspect, Carl Williams. This was, however, met with a few obstacles and introduced police to a darker side of their own force. On the 16th of May 2004, Terence and Christine Hodson were found executed in their home in Kew, a suburb in Melbourne. Terence Hodson was revealed to be a police informant. A week before the murders took place, ABC Radio reported that a leaked document outing Hodson as a police informant was circulating amongst certain criminal organizations. It is also reported that an associate of Lewis Moran hired Terence Hodson to take out Carl Williams back in 2001. Another plot twist developed for police as they learned that one of their very own members, drug squad detective Paul Dale, allegedly paid Carl Williams 150,000 Australian dollars to organise the hit on Terence and Christine. Paul Dale was later arrested and convicted. With this minor setback, however, police and Purana Task Force were finally able to catch Carl Williams. After a series of raids, on June the 9th, 2004, Task Force detectives arrested Carl Williams for conspiracy to murder. His associates were also arrested only meters from the home of their next target, Carlton crew member Mario Condello. Victoria Police said the raids had absolutely saved Condello from becoming the 28th gangland victim. It would seem that the city of Melbourne could sleep a little easier with Carl Williams' arrest. On the 28th of February 2007, Williams pleaded guilty in the Supreme Court of Victoria to the murders of Lewis and Jason Moran. Williams also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder gangland rival Mario Condello. The Purana Task Force had prevailed in ending the gangland killings. While police suspected Williams of several murders, he was only convicted of and pleaded guilty to 3. Under a special deal with police, he was not convicted for the murder of Jason's half-brother, Mark Moran. He was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment for drug trafficking, 27 years for the murder of Michael Marshall, 2 life sentences for the murders of Jason Moran and Mark Malia, 25 years for the murder of Lewis Moran, and another 25 years for the conspiracy to murder Mario Condello. On April 19, 2010, Carl Williams was murdered at Barron Prison. He was bludgeoned to death with an exercise bike handle by his cellmate, Matthew Johnson. After what would become a bloody and violent 12 years of the city's history, the Melbourne Gang Land Killings would claim their final victim,
by the sword,
the man
died by the sword.
that it all connected to. Carl Williams was 39 at the time of his death. He was buried in a golden coffin. He is survived by his widow, Roberta, and his daughter, Dakota Williams. And so our story ends with the Melbourne Gang Land Killings. A phenomenal story that has inspired many countless books and television series such as Underbelly, which I highly recommend that you watch after watching this video. This has been an episode of Shadow Matter, episode 2 in our series.
Nah, that joint was pretty dope, man. That joint was pretty dope, man. Carl Williams was a real gangster, man. Getting out the other bosses like, man, stop playing with me out here, man. Stop. Oh, yeah. He definitely wasn't going to live, though. Like, you know what I'm saying? They definitely, no matter where he was at, he was definitely going to have a problem, you know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure they paid his cellmate to kill him, you know? Nah, for sure. No doubt. We about to do another one, but I'm about to end this live stream and start up a new one so I could change the title to this joint. I'm going to change the title to this joint, then I'm going to start up another one. We're going to watch another documentary together, man. So y'all get ready. I'll be right back. You dig what I'm saying?